In this heartwarming story, we will explore how Jesus demonstrated love even in the face of intense hatred. It was a scorching day in Jerusalem, and a restless crowd had gathered in the town square. The air was heavy with tension, and the shouts of angry voices echoed off the stone walls. In the middle of the crowd, a trembling woman knelt on the ground, her face pale and streaked with tears. She had been caught breaking the law, and the punishment was clear. She was to be stoned to death. The mob clutched their stones, their faces twisted with anger and hatred. It was a scene of pure chaos. But then, as if out of nowhere, a man stepped forward. His calm presence silenced the crowd. The man was Jesus. What he did next would shock everyone and change their hearts forever. During Jesus' time, the land of Judea was filled with division. The Romans ruled with an iron fist, taxing the people heavily and crushing any rebellion. Meanwhile, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, demanded strict obedience to their laws. Those who couldn't follow the rules, like the poor, the sick, and sinners, were shamed and cast aside. But Jesus was different. Instead of siding with the powerful or punishing the weak, he spent his time with the outcasts. He healed the sick, shared meals with sinners, and even forgave those who had wronged him. This made him both loved and hated. Many admired his compassion, but others, the religious leaders especially, felt threatened. Who was this man, they wondered, to forgive sins and teach love? They plotted against him, waiting for him to make a mistake. One day, the Pharisees saw an opportunity to trap Jesus. They brought the woman who had been caught in adultery to him. According to their law, her punishment was death by stoning. They asked Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law commands us to stone her. What do you say?" It was a clever trap. If Jesus told them not to stone her, they could accuse him of breaking the law. If he agreed with the punishment, his reputation for compassion would be destroyed. The crowd held their breath, waiting to see what Jesus would do. Jesus didn't answer right away. Instead, he knelt down and began writing in the dirt with his finger. The crowd whispered among themselves, puzzled by his silence. What was he doing? Then, Jesus stood and looked directly at the crowd. His voice was calm but firm as he said, "Let the one among you who has never sinned throw the first stone." For a moment there was complete silence. The crowd, which had been so loud and angry, froze. One by one, people began to drop their stones. The older men, who had lived long enough to know their own faults, were the first to leave. Then the younger ones followed, until only Jesus and the woman remained. Jesus turned to the woman, who was still trembling on the ground. "Where are your accusers?" he asked. "Has no one condemned you?" The woman looked around, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one, sir." Jesus smiled gently and said, "Then neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." In that moment, Jesus showed love in the face of hatred. He didn't ignore the law, but he reminded everyone of something more important: compassion, forgiveness, and the understanding that no one is perfect. This wasn't the only time Jesus taught love in the face of hatred. One day, he told a story about a man who was beaten by robbers and left to die on the side of the road. Two people, a priest and a Levite, passed by but did nothing to help. They were too busy or too afraid to get involved. But then a Samaritan came by. Now, Samaritans and Jews didn't get along. They avoided each other at all costs. But this Samaritan didn't hesitate. He stopped, cleaned the man's wounds, and took him to an inn where he could recover. Who was the true neighbor? Jesus asked his followers. The answer was clear: the one who showed kindness, even to someone he might have considered an enemy. Jesus' entire life was a lesson in love, but his ultimate act of love came at the end of his time on earth. Even as he was arrested and beaten, he didn't lash out at those who hated him. Instead, he prayed, "God, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Who could show such love in the face of so much hatred? Only someone who believed in the power of love to change the world. Jesus' story teaches us something powerful. No matter how much hatred you face, love is stronger. It's easy to hate those who hurt us or to judge those who make mistakes. But Jesus showed us a different way. He taught us to forgive, to show kindness, and to treat others with compassion, even when it's hard. So, the next time you feel angry or hurt, remember this story. Ask yourself, how can I show love instead of hate? It might not be easy, but it could change someone's life, and maybe even your own.